Okay, so I think that we are starting now. Good, so good morning. Hey, hi from Prague. Hi from Edu Training Center. That here is a beautiful place, actually, in this nice Friday. I'm very pleased to be invited to talk about Cissp for a few minutes with a very enthusiastic audience in cybersecurity. So I was very pleased and happy that we have this opportunity. Edu Training organized this course as well, and I found the concept when we were talking about like, hey, we should really try to put some ideas around the certifications. What is it? Some expectations that people have about the certifications, and I do believe that that conversation really helps to make sure that this qualification is the right thing for you. What I've seen in the past is that people might be saying like, I don't know, there is an expectations, and they are like, I believe that this certification will help from this, from that, and sometimes the match happens, sometimes it is not. So I do believe that bringing this, and it was very good idea when we were talking about this with Edu Training to say, hey, we should be really upfront and very clear of what you can expect to help you to balance if it's something that you would like to achieve. The last point that we have here in the agenda is some of them. I wouldn't say like myths, but I will put it like some of the things that I found people struggling a little bit in the definitions that are in the content within the body of knowledge of the Cissp exam. So I hope that I can give you an idea of why some complex, complex I would say, if you frame things in a particular way, it's going to look very complicated. When you start to understand the logic of how things work, you might see the connection between all the domains. And I do believe that as well, having that visibility and understanding is going to be very useful for you to have the big picture of the certification, right? So my name is Jorge Carrillo. I'm a very big fan of I2. So I have the exams, and I've been doing many exams. So I have for development, networking, and I found very interesting journey. What I would say when someone asks me like, hey, why, why you're keeping doing these exams, right? I do believe that the learning experience is what is the add value proposition of the study. It is not just say, okay, I passed the exam, but it is all the effort that you have. And to be honest, when I was preparing for the exams myself, it has been as well a way, even to see how to manage a project, right? Your study project. All of us has a very busy lives, personal life, family, the work. So it's very interesting as well how to squeeze these, all the things that to do something extra, right? Have this time to study a little bit. And this is my personal motivation as well for this webinar. I've seen that people might spend, hours or 6 months and study for this exam, which is absolutely fine that's the plan, I have to say. But the reality and what I've seen even with myself is that it's very difficult to maintain the focus for 6 months, right? Keeping reading standards for 6 months, preparing for an exam for a year or 6 months. It's just, I found it's very, very, very difficult. So we have so much monitors. So before I carry on, some minor logistics. It's amazing that we have the channel, the streaming being happening now. So feel free to put your questions on the channel. At the end of the session, we are going to look into the questions that have been posted, and we'll have time to have a conversation and really make this the most useful for you. So feel free to keep sending questions. The more you send, In the event that I will not have the time to answer all of them, I'm going to have a personal commitment here to go through them, answering them offline and giving to edit training for distribution later on. So I really, if the questions we don't have the time or you are not satisfied with the answer, please just drop us a line and we can follow up on this. All right? So this is the logistics kind of thing. So let's get started. Just a quick intro about myself. Very big fan of cybersecurity and data protection as well. So that is my passion. Here's a link for you to look if you want to know about myself. But yes, so love the topics, and here are some reference for you to watch. All right. Okay. So let's start with the first topic. This content that you can see here, it is coming from the I2 body of knowledge of what is the certification, right? The reason why I want to put it here, it is really to highlight the different domains that are being included, right? So you have systems here, you have it here on the screen so you can see security, asset security, architecture, engineering, and it's a very, if you think into the list, it basically touches many areas within the IT domain and the security domain. So it looks like a little bit overwhelming of what it is. Now, when you see the list, right, one of the main things about this is, and that would be my number one point for you to have into consideration concerning managing your expectations in this exam, is that this is not a fully technical vendor exam. Meaning, for example, if we are talking about identity and asset management, we are not going to include some particular tooling. That is not the purpose, right? Or a particular brand to say, okay, you should use Cisco or Amazon or Microsoft. So it's completely neutral. This is an important thing to know because, people that is in security and, practitioners that we are hiring a company to resolve problems. And usually we tend to jump into, okay, give me the tool, show me, let me fix it, something that is not working. So this feeling is kind of normal, but you need to step a little bit back and look into the domains as an area that is about, I need to understand. I need to understand why it is relevant. I need to understand the importance of this for the business. So it is not about technology itself, right? And it is not about, for example, creating a virtual machine and trying to do a technical evaluation, right? So here, this is the first point that you need to have in mind, all right? Now, then we go to the next question, right? We are saying, okay, well, it's 8 domains. There is a lot of content, and if you see the official book, it's just like, you're like, wow, do I need to know all of it, right? Well, what the answer is, of course, you need to know it for the exam. But you need to somehow decompose that complexity in order for you to understand it, right? Which is not sometimes easy to do, because when you are looking into the content, we tend to go into the details, right? For example, a problem about risk management, right? What is a value, what is risk, and then you might start thinking about, okay, which technology, what solution can happen, how can I do it? And our mind works in a way that tries to follow that thought of how can I fix something, how can I use it, right? But before we go there, you really need to connect the dots. You really need to understand the overall complexity, right? So I'm going to give some hints about how to address that, right? Have the right mindset when you are looking into the domains and thinking about this whole certification, right? Okay. Now, I see that the first point to highlight in this diagram, right? Now the winter season here. On the right, we have some people sick. But the point here is that when I was thinking about this area in this particular slide, is about how things have been evolving, right? There is different needs for the society to capture information, right? So here in the right side of the screen, the description of an illness, the treatment, what happens, the impact, and things have been evolved, cameras, new technologies, the phone system, we get things connected. But if you look into this, it is not the technology itself what it is the most relevant aspect in that conversation. So for example, in the first slide, it is about how can I not get the illness? What am I going to do with the patient? So it's really the impact of the processing of information or what you want to communicate in the society as such. So the first point that we need to understand is that the society has a need, right? Many needs that we try to collectively address, and people in that process we are going to use some tools, right? But the whole point is how we are going to use information there, right? And information can be represented in different means, right? It can be in a paper, it can be in a picture, it can be in your phone, so it can be in your refrigerator, right? Or in a printer. So the first point that you need to be very clear here is that you need to have the idea of information technology, right? Information security, sorry. Information security in the sense of I'm really doing something, right, in the information domain, if you wish. And you need to abstract the components that are related with the technology only, right? So here in this example is you could argue of what type of material am I going to use for doing that canvas, right, to doing that drawing? For how long it's going to have? Should I put like 3 patients lying or 5? Is the composition good? And that implementation aspect will come in some point, right? But it can change, right? New techniques are getting on the way, new materials are there, the same situation with the phone, new things that are coming into the market, and it's very difficult to predict them, or basically just drive in that particular aspect of how things work technology-wise. So the first step is have a view of information, right? Because that's information what is moving the society. And the understanding of the technology will come later on, but if you don't understand the need of value of information itself, we can get lost, right? And I'm pretty sure that each of us has experienced that situation when we see, for example, a technical solution as hey, you should be using this because you resolve the security problem that I have in my mind. And the business is looking at you and saying like, well, maybe that's not my priority, or I don't see the point. I don't know what you are saying because actually I'm thinking about different problems that I'm trying to resolve. So I would say that this is one of the first things that we need to shift our mindset, right? Of course, that's not the end, right? Okay, we need to deep dive into solutions, right? Now, something that, you might say, I wouldn't say like kind of stereotypes, right? But when people think about security, and I don't get it, I'm fascinated with this type of images when I see on the internet. You know, the person with the hoodie and just behind the laptop hacking things, right? Systems that are complex, right? Like, well, here I have a very old-fashioned manufacturing machine. When I see this, I'm like, oh yeah, it looks like the complexity and, like the hoodie thing and the dark with these blue colors. That really looks like, that stereotype of the security function. The reality is that, when you see the movies, I think that it's a little bit exaggerated. But really the focus, it is not about the technology, as I'm stressing here, right, of exactly which tools you are using, or whether you are breaking into a computer itself, or the management of an infrastructure, or how you secure that. The focus is around the usage of risk management in the processes that you are using and in the technology that you are using. So instead, for example, in my first diagram here, when you have a process here, an old-fashioned technical thing, the Cissp thinks about information and processes that bring value to the company, and you need to manage the risks that are happening in that processes. So it doesn't matter if it's a server, a laptop, or a manual process as indicated here. The focus is on risk management. And this is interesting. I really like that concept because basically put your mindset in a way of saying, I'm not looking for perfection, right? Just for an example here, it is not around in that manual process on the right in these slides that people were the manual process itself. It's not around like I want to be perfect, super optimized, and I want to be and a state that is ideal. That is not the focus. The focus is there is a risk, there is a process that I'm doing manual, and what can I do to manage that risk, right? How can I do intelligent decisions? In technology side, the situation will happen the same. Now, the photo that that I have with a lot of monitors there, right? The number of assets that the company has and the assets or processes as well that are going to be used for processing information is going to be a massive amount, right? So there is a lot of work to do. There is a lot of assets to protect if you think about it. And it's impossible to go ahead and say, I'm just going to protect all of that, right? With the same level, or basically is having an ideal situation that doesn't happen in real life. So we need to focus on how to prioritize things, right? And my hoodie thing, that was just a personal, like how the industry see us. I think that in that way, the focus that I see in all the domains that we are discussing in the course is about the value that the security function can bring to the company. Because if you think the security function as a means only to stop the bad guys and say, I'm just, I'm only the guard, which, I mean, of course, that needs to be part of it. But the mindset and the focus is shifting a little bit to say, okay, you need to be that guard, but you need as well to help the business to achieve their missions and the objectives that they have. So it's moving to a shape of a partnership between the security function and the business, which is, to be honest, not a surprise because IT is really now the business as well, right? It's very difficult to find a company where information security will not be required at all because they need to process information, the customers, right? If you don't have a customer, well, you don't have a company. So if it's manual process, the security might be easy to address. If it's a lot of manual automation, it's going to be complicated. So absolutely, the shift from only, like focusing in just protecting this, my asset in isolation is going to be part of my job, absolutely. But the program really tries to put our mindset to add value to strategies, objectives of the company. And that conversation is kind of interesting because it is very easy to say, right? I can say, yes, do an alignment. But the reality is that it requires a lot of effort from both sides, meaning the business and the security function, to have that conversation. But that conversation should happen. That's the point. And I think that the whole content goes in that direction, right? Now, the other area that I found extremely, what I've seen people struggling when they are presenting the exam is when they focus in a particular phase of a life cycle. So, for example, I don't know, I want to prevent unauthorized traffic to get into my infrastructure, so I'm going to put a control, let's put a firewall, things are blocked, right? Which, yes, that's absolutely correct. You might use that technology, that's nothing wrong with that. You will stop it. But the program and all these domains, what they are trying to say to us is, look, this is just one step, right? You really need to understand the whole ownership of the control. So it is not about only the particular rule that you're setting, right? It's from baby steps number one. how you select this, how you determine that actually that is even necessary in the first place. Maybe you realize that you should be decommissioning, or that service actually, the traffic that you are thinking of is actually not anymore relevant, and you should be just disable it, right? One, how you select the control, the analysis that you do of the control, document the control, implement, testing, evaluation. So it's really understand the life cycle of the control instead of just looking into the particular step or activity that you are executing, right? So this is used as an example, right? Looking into the different phases. So just to put some concrete examples. How you collect things, how you identify the assets, once that you get it, how you're going to protect it, how you're going to store it, how you're going to monitor that it is actually there, the control and the value that you were thinking of, what happened if there is an issue, how you're going to recover, and for the last the last stage, going into a dispose, archiving, or giving to someone else. So if you see about all the life cycle of information of what you are trying to achieve, it gives you a holistic view of what you need to do. Because let's go back to a different example, right? You could say, oh, I have a super database my database has a super state-of-the-art security controls. No one can get here, which, okay, good, very interesting statement. But if you would say that, the next question will be, hey, but how are you, protecting the collection of the data, right? How you are, if you have a failure, can you recover the database? And then you have that conversation, and you might find out that, okay, maybe I'm focusing too much in one thing, and I'm not understanding the life cycle, right? So the whole 8 domains, everything is about understanding what I need to do in that life cycle. Right. There is 2 things that is going to be very, very much stressed in the program, and it's about the accountability. Accountability and the responsibility to protect the assets and who is doing what is going to be crucial for the success of that strategy and security that you will be implemented. So, for example, information is really across the whole business, right? So the life cycle is not going to stay in one vertical of an organization. So just to put a concrete example here, if data comes in, right, it's not just going to stay in the hands of one department, right? It's going to get by that department, given to another one, move to different, IT will be across the whole thing. So it's really something across the organization. So the security function cannot be in the position to understand and really determine all the aspects of the single value of or steps or process that happens across the whole business. So the life cycle understanding is one part, but the accountability and who is owning that particular step is going to be the second one, which in practice is very difficult, because you might say, for example, let's have a particular control, like, selection of vendors, for example, with these security requirements. But the reality is that the achievement of that control objective is not going to depend on the security function only, right? It's going to depend on the engagement with procurement, how project team defines requirements, how you talk to legal about, contracts and possibilities that you have. So it's a joint effort. So knowing the different roles, and due to the fact that this is a neutral vendor certifications, and due to the fact that the processes that are being described should be applied to any industry, right? So we are not thinking about how healthcare works or how manufacturing works. The type of roles are going to be very, very general. So 2 roles, for example, is going to be the data custodian, data owner, that would be like a couple of examples of this, and it stays at this level, right? So, which is as well, so in my experience, what I've seen is that in your company, you might have, for example, a definition of what owner means, right? And if you are in that situation, the way that you need to take the material is, I need to see the definition that we are working on, which it might be a little bit different what happens in your context, right? Now, if that happens to you, so of course, in the exam you need to put, you need to have the mindset of what the definitions is saying in the content. Now, one of the things that some of the feedback that I get time to time is like, does that mean that I need to unlearn what I learned in practice, right? Or what I'm learning here is actually theory and is actually not used. Now, something that answering to that point, the content definitions that are being put in the body of knowledge are consistent across the different standards in the industry. So the fact that you're following this is basically no contradiction whatsoever with what PCI will say, ISO will say, or NIST will say, or anything, right? So minor, how the wording might be presented might be slightly, very, very a little different, but in the nutshell, it's going to be the same, right? So life cycles, definitions, and accountability models are going to be equally recognized in other certifications or accreditations that your company might have in other standards. So you will not see this as a theoretical effort, because you don't want to put a lot of energy in a study and then just say, hey, this is absolutely something that lives in dreams, lives in my imagination, but it's never used. So these definitions are actually part of the consistent set of standards and frameworks that the body of knowledge is really consolidating, right? That is the thing. Now, the fact that we have a lot of frameworks to talk about it, in the sense that the exam touching PCI, touches in ISO, in NIST standards, there is so many frameworks. And one of and this is the point that I want to raise around going into the details, right? We tend to see a problem and start thinking about, okay, this is the way that I should fix it, right? Or this is the tool that I fix it. Now, what Cissp is the exam, the program is trying to communicate in the structure of this, in the training and in the content of the books, is there are many things to really digest, right? It's impossible to go ahead and spend in one day, let me tell you how ISO works in 2 seconds, right? That is going to be impossible to do. So what about if we look into the commonalities, what is common across these different standards and frameworks? And what about if I understand the principles that actually are being the pillars of that frameworks? Now, there is a lot of principles behind, and personally speaking, I found this very, very useful, because if you will give me a new standard, right, or a standard that I was not exposed to in the past due to, I don't know, I was working in finance and now I'm working in manufacturing, and I was not exposed to the obligations in the other industry, that actually shouldn't be a major stopper. Because at the end of the day, you will look into the principles and you will recognize the principles are going to be the same. Might be specified in different way in the other standards that you might have, but the principle is going to be the same, right? Just to give you a concrete example, here's one of the principles here in cybersecurity, right? In the section about cryptography, and we say it's known the Kirchhoff principle, and says crypto systems should be secure even if everything about the system except the key is public knowledge, right? Now that principle basically what it's saying is you should not secure your system, right? In that case, well, we're talking about a crypto system that is going to be used to protect the confidentiality. But basically what we are saying is you should not the security should not be based on the secrecy of the control, right? It should be, you need to maintain some parameter not disclosed, because otherwise, you will recover the whole thing that you're trying to protect. But you should not be based this in obscurity. It shouldn't be For example, I don't know, you find a vendor, it's like someone will say, I cannot tell you how this works, right? Because if you find it, then it's going to be less secure, right? Now that principle, even though it's presented in cryptography, you can apply it to different areas, right? You should not base, for example, if you're selecting a vendor and you ask like, I don't know, what is your security controls for managing that process that you want to outsource? And the answer is like, well, I cannot tell you because of security reasons. I get it that there are things that you cannot disclose from things about non-disclosure agreements or confidentiality. But the processes and principles that you should be using should be public knowledge, right? It's like I'm using, I don't know, segregation of my network. I'm not telling you how or the techniques or the details, but that's a principle. Everybody, if they have a flat network, well, that's not a good principle to follow, and that's it. So you will expect an answer around like, okay, well, we are based in, I don't know, in this framework, we are following this and that, and then you can have an idea. But when someone starts to be very obscure and I cannot tell you what is it, so that's against a principle, right? Even though the principle in the course is being presented in cryptography, it can be applied to other areas. So this is the value of principles, right? You can use it in different situations. And I found this very useful because instead of me digging into every 1,000 standards around and trying to understand the little details of every single standard, I can understand the principles and then I can navigate different standards that are appearing or things that are from different technologies. So it gives you a possibility to adapt to the changes. That is really the point, right? In reality, when you will be in the situation that you need to deep dive into the standard, yes, you will go ahead and read it, right? But from the purposes of having that general overview, right, it's impossible, and that's not the purpose, to go ahead in the details of all of them, right? So understanding the commonality, what is common, what is the strengths, why it is there, allows you to really even choose the framework that is the most suitable to address the things that you are trying to do, right? So we are getting just to the main points. I'm just going to add the last one. So just as a quick summary, right? We are protecting information, right? Can be represented in different means, in different ways, right? In different technologies. And I'm making the point that the focus is on risk management, how you manage the risk in that particular process, without thinking about only the technical aspects of it, but really looking into the life cycle, into the big picture. That is one of the areas. We are saying as well that due to the natures of different industries creating their own requirements, right, we really need to have an overview of what are the pillars, what are the principles that actually are the core elements of that standards, right? In the moment that I understand the principles, it's going to be easy for me to choose and keep learning, right? You are going to learn fast, right? Now, in this, just going to my point about the principles and going to my point about the life cycle, right? The last point goes around the global nature of our economy in general, right? So it's very difficult to find an environment where, I mean, you will not be trading with another business partner around the globe or a different location, right? So many things start to get connected. Different vendors delegate or have a sub-vendor that will do another activity. So we are living in this area where it is not anymore something that you will have full control 100%, right? So you have a lot of dependencies that is from a vendor, third-party software, libraries that you didn't write, operating systems that you are using but you didn't build them, outsourcing of process. So the global nature is starting to get a little bit complicated, right? Now, something that I would say for our European audience is a little bit hard in the exam is that there are few things that the exam will put focus on in some type of reports and some type of audits that we might not be very familiar with. Now, you need to embrace the learning experience by having the understanding that, okay, this is a global nature, right? There will be things about, for example, GDPR, and you might be, yes, okay, I'm more exposed to this because I'm in Europe, so I'm very exposed to this, right? All of us were exposed to meeting these compliance obligations. But someone from the US might not be fully, exposed to the same experience, but they might be exposed to different experience. And the typical example, the one that I found like very, very prominent, is the SOC type of reports. SOC 1, SOC 2, and SOC 3. These type of reports are being used in the industry, and this is something that some European colleagues are not exposed to much today. So the point that I want to stress with this slide is that if you find a content, right, that might not be relevant for your market, and you might be like, well, that happens in the US, or that happens in Asia Pacific. What am I doing here, right? The way that you need to embrace the learning is that, okay, number one, they are not going to expect any of us to be expert in everything that around the globe is expecting from a security professional, right? What they're expecting is that you understand that they exist, number one, so you don't get surprised when someone says, hey, there is a SOC report type 2, for example, and you will be, okay, I know what you're talking about. Maybe I don't know the details of exactly how this works, but I can go ahead and read it because I know the principles. You will focus on the life cycle, and you will be able to ramp up quickly, right? But the exam is really trying to understand that you have the global view, right? The global view of information security, and that there might be standards that are relevant in some regions, in other might be different standards. And I think that the value that I see here it is that in a global project, or when you are looking into scenarios where you will be required to be in a different market from where you are at the moment, it's going to be easier, right, to have a conversation with the expert in that market. So, for example, if you are thinking about, or you see, I don't know, some of your colleagues are in the US or are in part of South Korea, right, and they are talking about one standard, at least it's not going to be completely, completely alien to you. Like, what are you talking about? Now, so the point here is that it's really a push to say this is a global nature, and everybody needs to have a minimum understanding of the major reports, major standards that are being used, and major laws that happens around the globe, right? I didn't put, if I would be, for example, talking about this with, I don't know, US or North America audience, I would put here my example of GDPR, right? Because it's like, hey, you need to see the other way. So there is, for every market, there is going to be a surprise, right? And the whole idea is that we need to embrace it. That is really the whole point, right? So we are having 15 minutes. So we are trying to wrap up our conversations. Let's have some time for you to think about, if you would like to if you would like to raise a question, a comment, some type of feedback, it would be more than welcome. I'm going to check our chat to see if there is something here that we have as a question. Let's see. So, I wanted to stress, and if I think I say it, if for some situation you are like, well, okay, it makes sense to me, and after the weekend you say, hey, I would like to have that question, feel free to drop us an email, and you have my website, so just say, hey, George, can you expand on this? I'm happy to do so, right? So I know that it is, I think that Yes. Uh, I think the whole point around this is that don't stop learning, just keep learning. I hope that this particular hints is going to help you to see the exam and see the domains in a different way, right? So if I will super summarize my three key messages, right, is that we must be the most aligned to the business, right, to protect the information or manage the risk and help an organization to achieve their mission, right? It's impossible to be a genius in everything, so let's focus the attention to frameworks and standards, right, that I can be using. I know that we are super connected, so I really need to see the principles, right? So that's my third point, the third takeaway. Don't get into too much details, understand the underlying principles. And once that you have this mindset in these three topics that I'm talking about, the whole learning experience is completely different. Because now you know how to ask questions, you know how to, see things, and now this complexity that looks like, a book of 9,000 pages becomes something like, okay, yeah, there's a lot of information there, but you can digest it and by pieces have some mental model that you can work with, all right? So let me see. All right, okay. Yeah, so thank you for I have one question here. Now, I'm part of the board from our local chapter, so that last year has been, 2019 has been super quiet. So around at the beginning of 2000, I hope that we will be sending some communication. So please reach out to me, and we can plan something. But we want to again get our community together. Yeah, thank you. So to answer the question, till the end of the year, it's likely that we will not have time to make an event. But we've been talking to the other board members, actually last week, I think so, or this week, I just lost the time, but we just meet together and say, hey, we need to revamp this, and we are working out on this. But absolutely, this is part as well of reaching out to us, and we will plan something for 2020. Thank you. Okay, that was a good question. Awesome. Okay. Okay, let me see what it is. So I think that yeah, so you can reach out to EduTraining about the course. Reach out to me about the chapter that it is that we're trying to bring the community together. I really appreciate your time joining us today in this Friday in the morning, and saying so have a lovely weekend, have a good time, and looking forward to hear from you. All right, bye. Cheers.